Don Aurelio Bustamante finished counting the bills on the desk without looking at Celestina even once. Then he folded them, put them in a drawer with the key, and pointed toward the corral with a gesture that allowed no argument. If you believe honest people always find their way, even if late, subscribe to Cuentos del Viejo Campo and turn on the bell so you don't miss any story. There, tied to the fence with a short rope, was the donkey. It was a small animal, ash-colored, with its left front leg bent inward in a way that suggested something broken long ago. It looked at Celestina with eyes that were neither sad nor happy, but simply patient, as if it were used to waiting for the next move of human beings, without expecting anything good from any of them. 5 years of work, said Celestina quietly. And the donkey, said Don Aurelio from his chair, without lifting his eyes from the paper he had already begun to read. A deal is a deal. Celestina Viramontes was 41 years old, with hands that had embroidered more than 3,000 meters of cloth since her mother put the first needle in her hand at age 8, and with the habit of not crying in front of anyone who didn't deserve it. Don Aurelio didn't deserve it, so she took the donkey's rope, crossed the gate of the Bustamante Hacienda without saying goodbye to anyone, and began walking along the Durango dirt road with the animal limping 3 paces behind her. She had arrived at that hacienda 5 years earlier, when her husband died and left her with a debt and 2 hands. Don Aurelio had hired her to embroider the tablecloths for parties, the dresses of the town's quinceañeras he sponsored, the embroidered sheets that his wife sold in the capital of Durango. The deal had been clear: 5 years of work in exchange for a monthly salary that never arrived complete, always with a deduction for this or for that, and at the end of the 5 years, a fair compensation for services rendered. The fair compensation was a lame donkey that Don Aurelio himself had wanted to put down the year before because it could no longer carry loads. What neither of them yet knew was why old Prospero, the stable hand who had been at the hacienda for 40 years, had insisted so much that that particular donkey be the one given to her. Celestina walked 2 hours along the dirt road without quite knowing where she was going. She couldn't return to the room she rented in town. The month was already overdue, and she had nothing to pay with. She had no family in Durango. Her sister lived in Zacatecas. Her mother had died the year before. She had the earth-colored rebozo folded over her shoulder, the wooden box with her needles and threads that she carried in her free hand, and a donkey that limped and snorted and stopped every so often to look at the scrub as if there was something interesting in it. "Walk, Torcido," she said each time. She didn't know why she gave him that name. Twisted. It came to her on its own, the way things come when one is too tired to think carefully. Turning a bend in the road, she came upon the old couple. They were sitting together on a fallen log at the edge of the road, as if they had been there a while or as if they had always been there. With certain kinds of people, it's hard to tell. He was a small, wiry man with a palm fiber hat and old leather sandals. She was rounder, with a blue rebozo and a basket on her knees from which came the smell of freshly made tortillas. Their names were Evaristo and Concha, though Celestina didn't know that yet. "Where are you going, Senora?" asked the woman. "Wherever there's somewhere to arrive," answered Celestina. The woman looked at the donkey looked at her. Something passed between the two of them that Celestina didn't know how to interpret. "We have an empty stable," said the man. "Ever since we sold the mules, if the animal needs a roof tonight, and you do too, it doesn't hurt to ask." Celestina looked at them a moment. In other circumstances, she would have hesitated more, but the circumstances were what they were. The sun was already setting over the Durango Sierra, and Torcido had begun to make that soft, continuous sound animals make when they're reaching the limit of what they can do. "God willing," said Celestina. "I thank you." Evaristo and Concha's stable was a long adobe building with a tin roof that someone had patched many times with pieces that didn't always match. Inside, it smelled of old straw and dry earth and something else, something Celestina didn't immediately identify, but which seemed to her, strangely, the smell of things that had been waiting a long time to be found. There were 3 stone mangers along the wall, empty, a pile of firewood in the corner, a folding cot hanging from a nail, and in the manger at the back, buried under a mound of dry straw that nobody had moved in who knows how long, was something Torcido found before anyone else did. That was the next day. That first night, Concha gave Celestina a plate of beans from the pot, and a freshly made tortilla, and the two women sat on the corridor of the main house while Evaristo put water and fresh straw out for Torcido in the stable. The donkey ate with a calm that seemed grateful. He no longer snorted. "What can you do, Senora?" Concha asked her. "Embroider," said Celestina, "and whatever else is needed." "Embroidery is good," said Concha, "and nothing more." The next morning, Celestina opened the wooden box and took out her needles and threads. She sat in the corridor with the morning light on her fingers and began to work on the only thing she had at hand, the frayed hem of Concha's rebozo, which the woman had mentioned the night before without complaining, just noting it. It was a small job, half an hour. When she finished, Concha took it and looked at it a moment in silence. "You have the hands of God," she said. Evaristo, who was passing by with a bucket of water for the stable, stopped to see it too. "Doña Remedios in town has been looking for months for someone to embroider the tablecloths for her daughter's wedding," he commented, as if it were an observation about the weather. That same day, Concha sent word with the boy who brought bread in the mornings. Meanwhile, Torcido rested in the stable. Evaristo had put a bandage on the bent leg, not because it was going to cure it, but because it relieved the pressure, and the donkey had settled into the back manger with a tranquility that Celestina found curious. It wasn't the behavior of an exhausted animal. It was more like that of an animal that has arrived at the place where it was meant to be. What Celestina was about to discover, neither of them had imagined. It was Torcido who found it, or rather, it was Torcido who led Celestina to find it. 3 days after she arrived, Celestina entered the stable at dawn to bring him straw and found the donkey nuzzling insistently at the mound in the back manger, the one nobody had moved. He had been doing it before she came in, judging by the way the straw had been pushed aside in a wide arc, as if he had been working at it a while. When Celestina drew closer and pushed aside the straw with her hand, she found loose earth underneath. Earth that someone had dug up and put back a long time ago, barely tamped down, then covered with straw so no one would notice. She called Evaristo. The man came with his small shovel, the one he used for the garden, and dug carefully. At less than 30 centimeters deep, the shovel struck something solid. It was a clay pot sealed with wax, the size of a large gourd. Evaristo took it out slowly. He placed it on the ground between them. Celestina opened it. Inside were coins, gold coins, old, of the kind no one used anymore but that any jeweler or money changer would recognize. Stacked carefully, in 2 layers, almost to the brim, the 3 of them stood looking in silence. Concha was the one who spoke first. From the doorway of the stable where she had appeared without anyone calling her. "That belongs to Grandfather Loro. He always said he'd left something put away. We never said where because we never knew where." Evaristo nodded slowly. "The stable was his before he left it to us." Celestina looked at them. "Then it's yours." Concha shook her head. "Grandfather Loro used to say that what was put away was for whoever found it when they needed it. That's how he said it. And the one who found it was you." She paused. "Or the donkey." Torcido snorted from his manger as if it seemed a minor detail to him. What followed was not easy, because things that are worth something rarely are. Don Aurelio Bustamante found out, in Durango town's news travels with the north wind, and sent his eldest son to demand that the donkey was still his property, that the deal had not been legal, that there were irregularities in the settlement Celestina had signed. Don Aurelio's son arrived at the stable one Wednesday morning with a man who said he was a lawyer and who had the face of someone who wasn't. He found Celestina sitting on the corridor embroidering Doña Remedios' tablecloths, Evaristo standing in the stable doorway with his arms crossed, and Concha with a cup of coffee in her hand and an expression of absolute calm. "The donkey was handed over in payment for services," said Don Aurelio's son. "Whatever the donkey was carrying or where it was found is part of the animal's assets and belongs." "The donkey was carrying nothing," said Evaristo. "What was found was in my stable, on land that has been mine for 40 years, by inheritance from my grandfather Laureano Fuentes. If you'd like, we can review the titles." The man who said he was a lawyer looked at the other man. The other man looked at Don Aurelio's son. Don Aurelio's son looked at Celestina. Celestina did not lift her eyes from her embroidery. "The deal was the donkey," she said quietly. "There is the donkey. The rest has nothing to do with your father." There was a long silence. Honest people don't need what doesn't belong to them, said Concha from her chair without addressing anyone in particular. And those who aren't honest shouldn't either. They left without saying more. Senora Chola, who turned out to be Concha's cousin, and who had appeared that same day with a sack of beans as if she had always meant to come, watched them go off down the dirt road and said, "So be it," and kept unloading the sack. When autumn came to the Durango Sierra and the air began to smell of damp earth and burning firewood, Evaristo and Concha's stable was no longer empty. Torcido occupied the back manger, his, without dispute, and beside him were 2 goats Celestina had bought with part of the coins, because the rest she had used to pay for fixing the tin roof and to order wood for a new room on the side of the stable, a room with a window and its own door, where she and her embroidery box could really settle in. At dusk, the goats came back on their own from the plain. Torcido waited for them standing at the stable door, with the bent leg that no longer hurt him as much since Evaristo had adjusted the bandage with more care. He watched them arrive with that patience that had never left him, and then went in slowly, without hurrying anyone. Celestina watched them from the corridor, with the earth-colored rebozo over her shoulders and a new shirt she was embroidering for the town fair. The threads in the wooden box were almost all used up, which meant the work had come, and was still coming. Doña Remedios had sent her 3 more orders. The municipal president's daughter wanted a tablecloth for December, and Senora Chole had asked almost in passing if Celestina would be willing to teach her granddaughter. Sometimes the most desperate moments are not the end of the story. They are the place where the story decides to become something else. Celestina Viramontes received a lame donkey as payment for 5 years of honest work, and in that lame donkey came everything else. The stable grandfather Loro's coins, the room with a window, the goats, the work that came on its own simply because she was there to receive it. Not everything that looks like an offense is only an offense. Sometimes it is also a door, even if it has a bent leg and smells of old straw. Have you ever had to let go of something you loved in order to receive what you needed? If this story touched something in your heart, leave your comment below. Tell me from what part of Mexico, or where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel Cuentos del Viejo Campo and turn on the bell so you don't miss any story. And share it with someone who needs to remember that what looks like an insult is sometimes the beginning of something better. Until the next story. And they say in that corner of Durango that when someone passes along the dirt road at dusk and hears the sound of the goats returning to the stable, they know without needing to ask that inside there is a woman embroidering a donkey with the patience of a saint, and 2 old folks who still believe that what is well kept always finds the one who deserves it.